Hey, Dave.
You okay? How are you? How did? Hello there.
First time I've seen you, so congratulations on the job anyway.
We've been here for it.
So guys, just for anyone unfamiliar with the format, we're doing an initial section that can go straight after it's finished, nothing live, but the first section can go as soon as it's finished, and then we'll do a second section that will be for 10:30 Friday night onwards. There's plenty to talk about, so we are going to put a time limit on it. We'll do about 15 minutes for the first section, about 10 for the second, within reason, but just so we're not here all day. And we're going to start with rights holders, so that'll be Rob.
Michael, good to see you, mate.
Cheers.
Thanks for talking to us. How did you feel about the decision?
I suppose probably similar to most people. A little bit surprised. But the old adage, obviously, nothing surprises you in football, and obviously that is a phrase that gets used quite often up and down the country at whatever level. And you find yourself very quickly being put into a situation where you've got a group of staff and obviously a group of players that you have to get them prepared very, very quickly and try and get them concentrated on what's obviously a big game on Saturday.
Did you get to speak to Craig?
Yeah, I spoke to him a couple of times. Yeah.
How is he?
As you can imagine, he's a little bit raw still. I don't recall him having lost his job yet in football. Obviously working under Nige as an assistant and stuff. So he's a little bit raw, but having been there myself, I spent a bit of time on the phone talking through it, how I felt, how I dealt with it, etc. And like I say, I'm sure over the coming days and weeks, obviously he'll start reflecting and thinking positively.
He's been at this club for a very long time, from League One right through to winning the Premier League and then getting the top job. Do you think when we look back at the successful times of this football club, he'll be remembered as an unsung hero up there?
Absolutely. I've got no doubts about that. I think only 2 or 3 days ago I was doing an interview and I mentioned how highly respected he was by all the players and staff at the football club. And when I say staff, I mean the whole of the staff of the football club, everybody who works here at the stadium, everyone at the training ground. Because he's been here a long time and obviously, he's done a lot of roles. I think that the one thing I did mention, I've always mentioned since I've come here, it was part of me coming here, he's a top guy.
You mentioned that you were a bit surprised by the decision. Was it a harsh decision?
Obviously, that's certainly not a question for me to answer. I think it's obviously some of the hierarchy at the football club, but again, we are in an industry where surprises happen all the time. The biggest thing for me, obviously, is trying to make sure how we deal with it, rather than from Craig's point of view, we're all obviously respectful, and I've spoken to a couple of the staff and players about giving them a little bit of breathing space for a couple of days before, because I'm sure you'll get more sense out of him and have a better conversation with him. But yeah.
Does it really enforce the expectations and the ambitions of the owners of this football club that maybe mid-table isn't good enough?
Possibly. But I think you've only got to look at last season. Last season's a great example. And speaking actually to Tony Pulis after the game on Monday, I think it was Southampton who finished 8th last year on 46 points. And I think it was Watford who finished 17th on 40 points. So between 10 teams, you're talking about a 6-point difference. So the difference between finishing in the top 8 or the bottom 4 and just staying up by the skin of your teeth is 6 points. I don't see that changing this year. I really don't. And Tony was, agreeing with it as well after the game. It's anywhere outside the top 6, and I suppose before this season, Everton were probably the 7th team who were pushing to try and break into that. Outside of that, there's not a lot between all the teams.
I shouldn't say it, sorry. How have the players reacted? And we know they were very close to Craig over a long period of time. How have they reacted to it?
Yeah, like anyone, obviously, probably the initial feeling was obviously a surprise. But having spoken to the players today, they're obviously still a bit raw, as you can imagine. They've, lost a manager that they obviously respected highly and liked as a person, not just as a manager and a coach. So, but what I would say is that we had a really good session this morning. We changed the format slightly, just so I'd get a little bit of enjoyment and fun rather than too much concentration. It seemed to work.
I guess you can't accept them sulking. They've got a game to win at Swansea. How do you lift them?
Well, I'm hoping they don't need lifting because, that's I suppose. Normally, when a manager loses his job, I suppose there's a feeling of things not happening or unrest, etc. And I don't believe there's any of that. I think the group are very positive. We've had a tough start to the season. We've competed really well against 4 of the top 6 sides. Possibly should have took a point against at least a couple of them, looking back. And obviously competed against 4 other sides who are probably in that group I mentioned, who are going to be outside the top 6 with the greatest respect. So in terms of lifting them, I think today was probably that, and I'm expecting that to only be the day that I have to do it. I fully expect coming in tomorrow a mindset that is literally focused on what the job is on Saturday.
The job's available. You've been a number 1 yourself in the past. Do you want this job?
It's a situation for me where, and I've made this pretty clear to the powers that be, that I signed a contract in the summer to be the assistant manager of Leicester City, and I fully would love to honour that contract given the opportunity, but that is completely out of my control. So my full focus, and I can assure you my full focus is making sure I try and pick the right team for Saturday, and hopefully with a little bit of luck and a little bit of quality we can go and win the game.
That's not a no.
No, it's not a yes.
That's a good answer. Look, I was going to ask you, Craig was an assistant manager throughout pretty much the whole of his career and did a great job at it, a brilliant coach. He then put his head above the parapet to become a number 1, and it's cost him very, very quickly. Is there a lesson there? Is there to other assistant managers that it's a very different animal when you become a number 1, and you've got to really think about it?
It is a different animal because I know that from obviously my own personal experience. But what I would say is I think the years of experience that Sheikh's gained at probably the highest level as well. Even going back to working at West Brom as I did with him then, and working in around the first team, I think he earned that opportunity. And when he got the opportunity, arguably did a very, very good job at it. It's obviously a difficult industry that we're in, and we all know that. But in terms of other managers or myself or other people going from one role to the other, if you've earned that opportunity, there's no reason why you shouldn't take it and have a go at it.
What makes you think this job will be particularly appealing to lots of managers out there?
Well, you've only probably got to look back a couple of seasons. Although I'm not a big fan of looking back, if I'm being honest. I'm more of someone who tends to look forward. I think early on in my career as a young coach, you can rest on your laurels a little bit and look back at your achievements from the previous seasons. I think whoever gets the opportunity to come in and take this group of players, like I said, it's a good dressing room. There's some talented lads in there. There's 1 or 2 very, very hungry lads who are desperate to get an opportunity. And I must admit, my first home game, which was, I think it was the Brighton game, the atmosphere that's generated at this place is incredible. And I've experienced it as a opposition manager when I brought Blackburn here and we got turned over, thanks to Casper on the day, making a good save early doors, but forgive him for that. But no, it's an opportunity for someone that like I say, I can understand the amount of coverage that it gets.
You say you've spoken to the owners or the bosses, have you?
No, I've just all I've spoken to is John Rudkin.
Has he given you any idea of timings, how long you might be caretaker for, what the plan is?
No, just that obviously I'll be taking caretaker charge until told differently.
And then you come into this Swansea game, last question from me. What's your approach to it? Will you try and put your own stamp on it, or will you try and not change things too much for the players?
No, I don't want to change too much for the players. I mean, obviously, there might be little tweaks here and there. But, you know, it's one of them where you go into a game against Swansea, which I know is going to be very different to the one we played on Monday night. You know, they're two very different teams, very different styles. And, you know, whether it was me in charge as I am on Saturday or it was Craig, I would imagine, and I know, that things would be slightly different in terms of the approach going into Saturday's game as it was on Tuesday.
Hi there, Linda O'Brien from Premier League Productions. Can you just tell me how much differently you will have to play this weekend to get a result at Swansea than you have done in previous matches recently?
Not massively different. What we have found early on in the early part of the season, because we played obviously some of the stronger sides in the first 8 games, you tend to do a lot more defending what you would probably do if you came up against obviously the majority of sides outside that top 6. The approach will be slightly different, as I've just mentioned. You're playing against a different style. Whether they go with a diamond, whether it's 4-3-3, they're very flexible. Paul's changed and chopped this season. And we'll go there, like I say, with an approach that we can think that we can beat their style of play. And in terms of doing things differently from our point of view, there won't be much difference. It's a fine line. You know, if Riyadh scores from 6 yards out on Monday night, maybe it would have been a different story.
The last time this happened, the sacking was made, there was an absolute bounce. They went on a 5-match winning streak. How likely is that to happen now?
Who knows? I might not be here come Monday. So, yeah, I mean, we're in a situation where all I can do is make sure the players are in a really positive frame of mind, make sure that they're fully focused, make sure that in terms of preparation, they know exactly what Swansea's strengths and weaknesses are. And then literally hand it over to them as they cross the white line.
Rob was talking about, do you want the job? But how many people would you think might want the job that Ranieri lost his job after winning the title and another manager did after 8 games, having signed a contract just a few months ago?
Well, there's a lot of people out of work. So, as I know from personal experience, when you're out of work, jobs that don't seem too attractive when you're in work become very attractive. But I don't think that's the case with this job at all. I think probably one of the reasons Craig took it in the first place, it's a job that obviously will be excitable to a lot of people and will be, I think a lot of people out there will see it as a very attractive.
Mike, please.
Hi, Michael. Mike McCarthy, BBC Radio Leicester. I wanted to ask what you feel you've learned from Craig Shakespeare in the time you've been here. You spoke last week about how much you'd enjoyed working with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Craig, he's got a real laid-back personality. And his, I suppose, involvement and the way he involves the players in certain things has been quite impressive. Although he has got a bite, as all managers need to have at that right time, at that right moment. But in terms of what I've learned from Craig, definitely he's very good at involving people at the right time. So whether it's members of staff, whether it's opinions, whether it's getting the players' opinions on how we approach things, it's not that dictatorial way that obviously some managers tend to have and can have and enjoy being in charge because it's a power thing. Craig is very open to suggestions and ideas, and I think it takes a brave man to do that sometimes because we've seen it too many times in the past, certainly going back probably 5, 10, 15 years. I think some people can get the number one spot and all of a sudden the power gets to the head a little bit.
How similar or different would you say you two are in terms of management styles?
Good question. I think we are different. And I think that's why it would have worked. I think obviously, I've worked with Craig before, like everybody knows, at West Brom. I think people judge me wrongly. I think people look at me and think that I'm something that I'm probably the opposite to. The old judging a book by its cover comes to mind a little bit when people do meet me. But I think there are definitely similarities. I'm probably a little bit more aggressive without being over-aggressive. That's probably the best way to put it.
I won't describe you as a teddy bear then. I was interested in terms of what you feel has gone wrong so far this season and what you feel like you can change in the time that you've got.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to put a real pinpoint on one particular thing. Like I say, and I don't want to bore people with it. We have played for the top 6 sides and competed really, really well against them. In the other 4 games, we certainly picked up a point against Bournemouth, Huddersfield, and obviously West Brom, and beaten Brighton. If we would have had them as the first 4 games of the season and we picked 6 points after 4 games and then lost 4 games in a row, but to the calibre of teams that we played, would perceptions be a little bit different? Who knows? But that's football, and that's where we're at. But sometimes you just need a bounce of a ball to get that first goal. I think that's been probably one of the things that we would like to improve if possible. I think this year we've only scored the first goal on one occasion, and that was against Brighton. And incidentally, it was probably our best start of the season as well to a game. So that's something that we'll try and address if we can do on Saturday and going forward. Because getting that first goal, doesn't matter what level of football you're at, it just gives you an incredible opportunity to try and win the game.
You talked in the past about the difficulty of British managers getting opportunities in the Premier League. Would you like, if it's not you, a British manager to be in charge of this club?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be an absolute hypocrite if I said any differently. Yeah, at the end of the day, that's one of the reasons that, I come here. There's probably 3 or 4 reasons. One, and the biggest one, was definitely Craig, because I knew him and I'd worked with him before. I walked away from a stable environment at Oxford where we were progressing and doing really, really well. But I felt that an opportunity like this might not come around again, so I sort of took it with both hands. Working in the Premier League was a pull, and one of the biggest things I did say, and you've all seen it in the interviews that I've done previously, even when I was still at Oxford, was there is a lack of opportunities for British coaches at the top end of the game, and if it does go to a British coach, then I wish him all the best, and see where we go from there.
And in terms of the problems that Leicester have at the moment, is it as simple as changing the manager?
I'm not sure there's all sorts of problems. So it's a difficult question to answer, because if you've been in the meeting that I had this morning and watched the training this morning, you'd be thinking a different story in terms of all sorts of problems. And I think obviously H has spoken to some of you guys this morning. There's actually a really good feeling around the camp in terms of we come off the pitch and against West Brom, having come from behind again. So it showed a great resilience, obviously, the lot of them. And there was a feeling that, we should have won the game, and we're probably the only team trying to win the game. They've had one shot goal, one shot on target, some goal and some shot on target, by the way, but and they got something out of the game.
Leicester seemed like a very difficult club to place in terms of its capability. Having won the Premier League, then had to dig themselves out of trouble last season. What do you think this club is capable of?
Well, again, if I flip back to one of the questions I answered before, I genuinely believe that these 14 clubs, that there's no doubt about it, somewhere within the club, they probably think they can finish 8th. But at the same token, there's probably another 13 clubs thinking exactly the same thing. That's probably a bit of an exaggeration. There's probably 3 or 4 clubs who think if we stay in the league, fantastic, job done. But there's probably at least 10 clubs who probably finish in positions 8, 9 and 10.
Just finally, we know Robert Huth and Matty James have injury problems. Any new injury problems ahead of the weekend?
No.
Thanks very much. Good luck.
Thanks, folks.